Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Bearable Bull here. And I got this aggressively average content for you today. As what you see on the screen is Michael Saylor talking to Altcoin Daily about Bitcoin taking over everything. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because there's this narrative that a lot of people in crypto want to build that the XRP community is delusional. And while there are sometimes some far-fetched price valuations and scenarios that we do discuss, there's nothing more delusional than believing that an antiquated technology that is not environmentally friendly and that cannot scale is going to take over all these asset classes, especially gold, which has withstood the test of time. Ladies and gentlemen, we are digitizing payments in the real world. We are moving towards fast digital payments, as you can see by this woman on the screen, who's over here paying with the palm of her hand. This is where the world is eventually going to go. And while I'm personally opposed to biotech, where you have implantables in your body doing this, there's going to be a segment of the population that wants this, adopts it, and will make it happen. Remember, I'm opposed to it. But we will eventually get to a point where digitizing payments and a cashless society will be at the forefront. And trust me when I tell all of you, I do not believe that Bitcoin is going to be the one that takes over the planet. And I'm going to explain to all of you why in just a second. But first, we had a massive video put out by David Schwartz yesterday, and specifically, it was a Twitter Spaces shared by 801XRP where he was asked directly, do you believe there could be a scenario where there are two world reserve currencies at the same time? And David Schwartz answers yes. I want you all to take a listen and let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And then I'll add my 2 cents.
Do you believe that there can be two existing world reserve currencies to simultaneously exist?
I do, and I think that could happen. I think it's quite realistic that a lot of the world is just done with the dollar as the reserve currency. And I think that there's a lot of places that are willing to try something else. And one of my scenarios, and I don't think it's going to play out quickly, but like one of my wild case success scenarios for a digital asset is if countries start to realize that the US dollar is not going to be the reserve currency forever. Other things are going to be the reserve currency. And the same thing that we saw with banks. Like people, when we started selling software to banks, people would say to me, why would a bank use something that like you guys were selling them when they could use something that was like made by banks? And what they didn't realize is that only like 10 banks in the country on the planet are Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan Chase, like the ones who would build a system that the entire planet would run on. For the rest of the banks, that's 6,000 smaller banks. Those are their biggest, strongest competitors. Those are the entities they hate the most. They would not want to use the system built and maintained by them because it's going to be biased in favor of them, their biggest and strongest competitors. And I think the same thing could happen to nations. Like every nation would love for their currency to be the world reserve currency. That's helped the US, that's grown the US economy, quote unquote, unfairly by leaps and bounds for decades. And every other country would be like, yeah, we'd like to have the world be the world's reserve currency. But the only countries that could possibly pull it off is the US holding its position, maybe the EU, maybe Russia, maybe one or two others. But realistically, most countries know that if there's going to be a new world reserve currency that's a country's currency, it's not going to be them. And so they might actually prefer a currency that nobody can control to one that's controlled by their largest geopolitical rivals. And so that's like what I think is the biggest possible success scenario for digital assets, if these countries are like, okay, well, the US dollar can't hold on forever, but it's not going to be our currency because no one's going to want to repeat the US dollar scenario. Nobody but the EU wants the EU to replace the dollar, right? Nobody but Russia wants the ruble to replace the dollar. Nobody but China wants the yuan to replace the dollar. So Maybe they could settle on a currency that nobody could control rather than one controlled by their most powerful geopolitical rival. So if you want a success scenario, that's the one that I think is the most likely.
But the money question is, how do you get everybody to agree?
Well, I mean, they might agree if the alternative is that their geopolitical rivals force some new replacement for the dollar that's not, that just if they just replace, the old boss with a new boss. If the choice is no boss, if that happens to make a bunch of cryptocurrency people rich, I don't think they're going to see that as too much of a minus.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me spell this out for you very quickly, because David Schwartz is an absolute professional, and he's also very responsible. He's not allowed to be hypey and clickbaity, and he's not allowed to necessarily say everything that he knows could potentially be true. But me, I'm some anonymous motherfucker on the internet that says aggressively average every single day. So I could say whatever the hell I want to say. And from what I got, based on what he said, ladies and gentlemen, smaller countries and smaller banks are more incentivized to having more decentralized systems, where the JP Morgans of the world and the United States, Russia's, China's of the world do not have a global monopoly on the financial system. Point blank. Ladies and gentlemen, XRP was made to be a neutral bridge asset to level the global financial playing field. And what we're seeing right now is all those smaller countries like Montenegro, like Colombia, Palau, building CBDCs on Ripple's CBDC platform to run on XRP Ledger. This is extremely important for every single one of you to understand. Him discussing the scenario of there being two world reserve currencies means that there's the potential of the US dollar to stay on top, but maybe something else to join it. Do you guys believe XRP could be the chosen one? Because I definitely think so, because the alternatives are frightening. Here, what you see on the screen is China's CBDC linked to a digital ID and a social credit system that is financial slavery. But with an XRP-based decentralized neutral bridge asset-style world reserve currency system, we have a fighting chance. We have a decentralized network where we can operate and have a chance of freedom. And like David Schwartz says, I think a lot of these other countries in the world wouldn't mind too much if some crypto individuals and crypto investors end up getting rich as a direct consequence of this scenario. This was one of the most bullish things I've ever heard spoken, and I'm going to echo this sentiment throughout the entire community. I believe we are in the correct digital asset, and I believe the Bitcoin maxi is trying to tell all of you that their coin being number one is what's going to happen is delusional. First, it was Michael Saylor in the beginning of this video talking the nonsense that Bitcoin will replace gold, and that won't happen. Bitcoin can be an alternative store of value, but it's not going to replace gold. And in fact, Chris Larson breaks it down eloquently. Complete credit to Crypto Eddie and Riz XRP for sharing this. And I want you all to take a listen.
Real problem for you. And the SEC lawsuit was filed against Ripple. In a press release said that Bitcoin and Ethereum are Chinese controlled. In December, the Ethereum creator said a bunch of things, including that XRP is still centralized. He also said he hasn't gotten an apology. Is he going to get one?
So, we used to hang out with Vitalik. He was like covering the space before he started Ethereum. I think Vitalik's been on Twitter too much. He's got that Twitter disease. But look, it's a very tribal industry. And so every protocol has its sort of army, so to speak, and they all hate each other. Well, not entirely. It's starting to wane a little bit, but that's what that is. I mean, what Vitalik said there is just BS. And was he offended that we said that proof of work was controlled by China? Well, it was, until they kicked everybody out. Now it's all here. Now, hats off to Vitalik for leading Ethereum to switch from proof of work, burning insane amounts of energy, to cutting that by 99.9% by moving to a different system. Hats off to them. But that's another reason why it's such a head scratch that U.S. policy now, and Gary Gensler in particular, is a big Bitcoin fan, He's sort of put everything in this big question mark, except the thing that is literally, it's using about 100 trillion watt hours in energy.
More energy. So, why do you think he's been so aggressive in going after it? Just a power, like he wants to control it, and he feels like it's close enough to currency.
It's sort of it's sort of the Gary Gensler MO. It's sort of what he did when he was the CFTC, and it's sort of what he did when he brought down LIBOR. By the way, did a bunch of lawsuits, lost all of them, but he doesn't care. Yeah,
futures trading.
He's trying to destroy the industry. That's what he's trying to do. Except Bitcoin. He's a Bitcoin fan. He's always talking about Satoshi, this, that, and the other thing. He did a bunch of tours with Joey Ito back in the day with MIT, all over the world, kind of bashing everything except Bitcoin. I just don't get that. That makes no sense to me. And it's totally inappropriate for a U.S. regulator to take that position, an unelected person. Talk about agency power, everything the Supreme Court hates these days. This should go to Congress. Congress should pass regulation. This is the weird point where people say, the industry doesn't want regulation. No, they want regulation to make it clear.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a good point. For the longest time, Bitcoin has been existing in a vacuum where it has been allowed to trade without real competition from another regulated asset. But this time it's different. This time we're heading into a crypto bull market where XRP has full-blown clarity, is deemed not a security by Judge Torres, and will be able to compete on a level crypto playing field. And while the reality is that we still need to be in an environment where there is some clarity. Oh, if you're an XRP holder, this is the best time to be alive. We've been holding on to this damn XRP for so long. And despite the fact that the price has been pulling back quite a bit recently, that should not dissuade you from this next cycle. XRP is poised to take over, at the very least, the second spot in the crypto market. Because while ETH is number 2 and does have a lot of utility, it is slow, it is antiquated, it cannot scale, and it's still figuring shit out. But the one thing we really need to look forward to, regardless of whether or not you don't like Bitcoin, is this Bitcoin ETF. Here to cap off this video for today, with all this bullish XRP sentiment, I'm going to leave you with Cathie Wood discussing what would happen if the SEC approved a Bitcoin ETF. Well, it's very likely we're not there yet, and they'll probably do so around 2024. Cathie Wood states if one Bitcoin ETF is approved, they'll approve quite a number of them all at once. And that will open the floodgates. Trillions will pour into the market. And that's when we become the new 1%. Ladies and gentlemen, don't get it twisted. We're on the precipice of profits. And I can't stress this enough. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Bearable Bull here. Thanks for tuning in. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. Now I'll be back tomorrow with another video.
So you are in this race. Let's talk about the race a little bit. The first important deadline coming up is August 13th, where the ARC filing, the SEC is either going to delay it, which we think they'll probably delay it, and then BlackRock is later. You filed before BlackRock, but BlackRock came in with the surveillance sharing agreement with Coinbase. That was novel, right? Now we're looking in the future, there's talk of a common clock where the SEC could approve a bunch of ETFs at once, putting you on a level playing field with BlackRock and others. What's your take on how this will play out, given you filed earlier?
I think you're probably right that August 13th will come and go, and I think I think the SEC, if it's going to approve a Bitcoin ETF, will approve more than one at once. So then, again, because most of these essentially will be the same, and it will come down to marketing, communicating the message. You know, we've been putting out our Bitcoin monthly for the last year. We are now starting a Bitcoin brainstorming session. Our first one we launched last Thursday. So we're trying to get the word out there that, you know, our research is deep. And we've been doing it since 2015 when we gained our first exposure to GBTC. We were the first public asset manager to gain exposure to Bitcoin at all in 2015.
That's exactly where I want to go. The Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, known by its ticker GBTC. If you look at ARKW, for example, your ARK Next Generation Internet ETF, right now I see GBTC as the third largest holding. If we are in a situation where the SEC does give its blessing for a spot Bitcoin ETF, would you plan to sell out of GBTC and buy one of these physically backed funds?
I cannot talk about what we would and would not do. And in fact, our compliance team is, you know, giving us marching orders not to talk very much about this filing and its aftermath at all. So just the fact that we filed with our partner 21 shares is as far as I can go.